Danya was hungry. Written by Johnny Fist. Danya had an unusual appearance, an upturned nose, narrow eyes, and thin lips. Many thought he was Mongolian, though both his parents looked distinctly European. No one could understand how the boy ended up looking that way, least of all his father. He suspected his wife of cheating more than once and forced her, and more importantly himself, to take a paternity test. The test confirmed that they were indeed Danya's biological parents. But Danya's behavior only grew stranger with age, no less baffling than his looks. He did things no one could explain. When Danya was 7, his father took him to a doctor. Actually, not just one, practically all of them, especially the ones called psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and all other psychotypes. Because Danya tore the heads and legs off all dolls. That worried his father a great deal. All the doctors claimed with one voice that the boy was absolutely healthy. They said it was a difficult age and possibly the result of his environment. Because Danya was a quiet boy, and his unusual appearance for the area made his peers avoid him. So according to the doctors, Danya had grown into a sociopath. At 7 it wasn't yet obvious, but they warned that things could get worse if he wasn't integrated into civilization and social interaction. Danya's parents didn't know what else to do, so they sent him to his grandmother's village for the summer, where there were plenty of other children spending their vacations, children like Danya. And so he ended up at his grandmother's house. Unfortunately for her, she hadn't had the pleasure of seeing him often in his 7 years of life, so she was both happy and unsure of how to handle him. But she had the whole summer to figure it out. Danya spent the first week very calmly. He barely went outside and didn't quarrel with his grandmother. She didn't notice much difference with him around. She lived as usual and continued her routine. After another week, Danya discovered the garage, which still held various tools that belonged to his late grandfather. Saws, rakes, a pre-war saber, and other junk his grandmother hadn't thrown away in memory of her husband. Danya took a liking to the saber and began swinging it around. He really liked it. He even managed to chop off a few branches with it. Twice he cut branches heavy with ripe apples, and a couple more times he sliced through raspberry bushes. That's when his grandmother caught him in the middle of this decidedly not childlike entertainment, and punished him the only way she remembered from her own childhood. She whipped him with a belt. Danya had never been whipped before, because he had never given anyone a reason. The punishment offended him deeply and made him cry. After that, he hated his grandmother, and if only she had known. Danya stopped talking to her. When she asked about food or drink, he answered with single words. She didn't know what was happening to the child, and even considered apologizing. But her elderly stubbornness convinced her she was right. Not that an apology would have helped. On the 6th day, after the incident, the Inquisition arrived at her house, embodied in Danya. In the dead of night, around 3 a.m., while his grandmother slept, Danya got out of bed. He hadn't slept properly for several nights, went straight to the shed, found the saber, and returned to the house. He walked up to his grandmother and stared at her intently. If people knew how angels sleep, they would never want their sleeping faces to look like hers. Her left breast, youthful only 50 years ago, hung loosely out of her nightgown onto a yellowed sheet. Her mouth was open, her eyes rolled upward. Wrinkles created an indescribable pattern across her face. Danya looked at her, silently raised the saber, and chopped off her conveniently exposed neck. She died instantly. He didn't even need to strike a second time. Danya watched the blood spurt calmly, walked back to the shed, returned the saber to its place, and went back inside. He lay down and fell asleep. In the morning he woke full of energy and in a cheerful mood. He went into his grandmother's room, looked once more at the blood-soaked bed and what had once been her warm body, sighed deeply, took out his phone, and called his father. With the same chilling calmness, he told him that Grandma had died and he didn't know how. Then he hung up. A few hours later his parents arrived, with the police and paramedics. No one suspected Danya in the slightest. Rumors were already spreading through the village. Someone was stealing chickens and slashing the throats of goats. Maybe a bear or a wolf. Maybe it wandered here by accident. The possibility that a 7-year-old boy had chopped off his own grandmother's neck wasn't even considered. Danya's father insisted he was such a calm child he wouldn't hurt a fly. Dolls aren't flies, so those didn't count. Danya was taken back home and once again dragged to doctors. Now they had to check him after such a shock. Again, everyone confirmed that the boy was perfectly sane. His father wasn't particularly upset. After all, it wasn't his mother, but Danya's mother was deeply shaken. If only she knew. A month later, everything was forgotten. It happened to be Danya's father's birthday, and the whole family went to a restaurant to celebrate. Turning 40 is a big date, so the guests were many, and the gifts equally grand. One of the gifts was a large machete. Strange gift for a grown man, but he had mentioned at work that he wanted a knife like the one in a certain blockbuster. His colleagues obliged. For half the evening, Danya's father swung the gift around. He liked it very much. Danya sat in a corner, apart from the other children, silently watching his father's performance. He liked the machete too. The celebration ended, and they all returned home. Tired and very drunk, Danya's parents went straight to bed. Danya went to bed as well, but couldn't sleep. As much as he was capable of emotion, he was emotionally stirred. At 3 a.m, he got up and went to the kitchen where all the gifts still lay unopened. He took the machete and repeated all the movements his father had made. Then he calmly walked into his parents' room. They were asleep. Raising the machete, he delivered 2 blows to their throats. Not a single scream. Blood spurted from their arteries, both his mother's and his father's. In his mind, Danya decided he was offended because they had sent him to that grandmother who had beaten him so severely. Unexpectedly, Danya became an orphan. There was no one left to call, so he simply stayed home for 4 days. There was plenty of food left over from the birthday party. They had taken a lot from the restaurant, so Danya entertained himself with it and with the machete. After 4 days, someone knocked. It was the neighbors, alarmed by the smell and the suspicious silence. Danya calmly opened the door and let them in. What they saw was the bodies of Danya's parents with severed heads, already decomposing, and calm little Danya, who said in a pleasant child's voice, "Please come in." The neighbors didn't get far. One of the women fainted, and the other quickly dragged her away. She felt she shouldn't leave her unconscious friend alone with Danya. Then came the police, the ambulance, and all the other services. They took Danya away. He calmly confirmed that he had killed his parents. He didn't even call it that. And when they asked about motives, and he explained about the grandmother and the whipping, they concluded he had killed her as well. A 7-year-old boy had murdered 3 of his relatives with a saber and a machete. "Someone, call Rodriguez immediately." Danya was placed in a special institution where he was to spend the remainder of his many days. And remember, children are the flowers of life.